So I was super excited when I saw that this month's Soul Matters theme was the practice of story, because I love stories. I believe that storytelling is one of the most powerful religious and spiritual tools we have, as well as the most ancient. Human beings have been weaving stories since we developed language. Storytelling is how we make meaning out of our lives and the world. Stories are how we celebrate, how we grieve, how we heal, how we wonder, how we experience gratitude. Through stories, as with music, we can encounter the divine. We can touch the soul. Storytelling makes us human. In doing research for the sermon, I came across Ben Okri, a Nigerian-born novelist, poet, and storyteller who talks a lot about the necessity of stories and their double-edged nature. He writes, "A people are as healthy and confident as the stories they tell themselves. Sick storytellers can make a nation sick. Without stories, we would go mad. Life would lose its moorings or orientation. Even in silence, we are living our stories. Stories can conquer fear, you know. They can make the heart larger. They can make the heart larger." So here we are on the edge of a major shift in our country's political leadership, again, wondering about the future, again. And let's face it, many of the stories told during the election and that led to the results were sick stories. Because these stories lifted up and affirmed, among other things, lying, abuse, the denigration of others, and a blatant disregard for the rule of law. They nurtured resentment. They nurtured division towards one's neighbors. But this is the path the country chose, and we are going to have to navigate it. I know that many people, maybe even some of you, are feeling helpless in the face of what might come. Sometimes I fall into that category. Sometimes I feel like I'm an alien living in a world I don't understand and where I don't belong, where the best option seems to be to hide away and watch the Great British Bake Off on continuous loop. But I have this job where I'm called to make meaning out of life and the world around us and to help us articulate and live into the story of our faith and the values that it calls us to cherish and practice, which are all grounded in the spiritual discipline of love. Because, for better or for worse, our Unitarian Universalist story is a love story. It's not a fire and brimstone story. It's not a chosen people story. It's not a purity and piety story. It's not even a social justice and only social justice story. It's a love story. A love story for this life that we have been given, the people and the creatures we have been given to live it with, love for the earth that gives us life, and for some of us, love for a divine presence that loves us and wants us to love each other back and will love those that we cannot. My coach, colleague, and dear friend, Reverend Dr. Larry Pierce, you may remember him. He did a couple retreats with us here, shared with me a sermon that he preached on November 10th to his congregation. He said that we live and we lead from the stories we tell, because stories are the intermediary step between our experiences, what has happened to us, and the next actions we take. So, experience, story we tell, leads to the actions that we take. Therefore, we need to be thoughtful and intentional with that intermediate story space, taking time to understand the whys and wherefores before we act, that difficult spiritual discipline of learning to respond rather than react. Ramon, you did that really well with your friend. That was a good example. Thank you for doing that for me, giving me an example of responding. Especially in times such as these, a liminal season, or an edge time, as Larry calls it, when we recognize that the past we are familiar with is over, but the future remains unclear. It might feel like the end of the world as we know it, and it may be the end of the world as we know it, but here's the thing, it's also the beginning, right? It's the beginning. So the question that lies before us, as Larry said, is what stories will propel us forward, individually and collectively, toward the future we want? Because we live and lead from the stories we tell. We need to take time with this intermediate step of discerning our understanding of the whys of what has happened before we take any actions, because it is vital we choose wisely the stories into which we will live and lead. Some stories limit the horizons of the possibilities we see before us and the options that we think we have, while other stories can open those horizons and equip us to work toward the future we want. Or as Ben Okri noted, stories are not innocent. We should be careful about the stories we listen to. We should be skeptical and critical. We should always ask questions about them and seek to make a distinction in our minds between good stories and false stories. Stories that limit our horizons are ones centered in fear, despair, judgment, hyper-individualism, scarcity, things like that. Stories that can open the horizon are centered in virtues like generosity, gratitude, joy, compassion, forgiveness, neighborliness, and my favorite, curiosity, wonder. Stories that limit our horizon make us believe we have little or no agency, that there is no hope. Stories that open our horizons invite us to participate in bringing virtues to life, trusting that even if we do not see the future come into the fullness of the future we hope for, we have indeed bent the moral arc of the universe towards love, if not justice. I believe that many of the stories being told on a national level are sick stories because they are not making our hearts larger, quite the opposite. And that is true all along the political and social spectrum, not just one side or the other. So as we contemplate our actions in the months and years to come, I believe we need to focus where we have the most agency, where our stories can have actual impact, which is at the local level. Honestly, we can't change the national story, at least not from above. But as the Tao teaches, cultivating virtue begins from within ourselves, then our families, and then our communities, and only then can it reach out to the nation and to the world. So we have to begin here with articulating our local stories. Who are we as a Unitarian Universalist community of faith, and who are we called to be? What is our story for these times? Who are our neighbors, and what are their stories? Maybe we need to listen to their stories. And where do our stories intersect? And only then can we think about what actions, grounded in the values and virtues of our story, can we take? How can we gather soul strength from our stories? Where and with whom can we build partnerships and connections to serve those most at risk and propel us forward to the future we want? While we need to pay attention to what is happening nationally and internationally, our local story is where we are most empowered and empowering. Jeanette, Stephanie, note cards, pens. I'm giving you guys an assignment today. Jeanette and Stephanie are going to pass out note cards and pens. And I want you to complete this thought in 1 or 2 sentences as we begin to sketch out our local story here at First Parish. This is just the beginning, ... See what you can come up with over the next couple of minutes. I'd like to invite you now to take the next 5 to 7 minutes to share with the people around you what you came up with, even if it was, I had no idea what this woman was asking me to do. That's fine too. This is just the beginning. Take a few minutes and talk. So what did you hear? What did you hear from one another?
That we all said more or less in different words the same thing, kind of aspiration. Yeah, and how to meet it all. Anybody else?
Or did you just use this as an opportunity to say Happy New Year and catch up?
I won't use one of my words, I'll use one of Josh's. It means a lot to me, resilience.
We had 3 interpretations. One was the church, one was the universe, and one was family. The universe. Everything.
You took the Tao very seriously. Anybody else? Well, thank you.